At my niece's birthday party, something happened that I never imagined could occur within my own family. My parents and sister held down my 11-year-old daughter, Grace, and chopped her hair off so that she wouldn't outshine her cousin. I wasn't there when it happened. I had to work that day, a Saturday hospital shift, something I often do. But that morning, Grace was so excited. She'd been planning for weeks. Her hair was her pride, washed, detangled, and wrapped in a silk bonnet. She'd begged me to take her to a real salon. It wasn't the usual strip mall place where the lighting was harsh and the haircuts were rushed. She wanted to feel beautiful, just this once. I picked up extra shifts, canceled my massage, and handed over $120 so she could choose her look. Soft curls, half up, with pearl pins in a side braid. She was so happy, asking if her cousin Bella would like it. Bella is my niece, Sabrina's daughter. I assured Grace that Bella would love it, and she looked beautiful. She even handmade a gift for Bella, wrapped it in glitter tape. I dropped her off, kissed her goodbye, and went back to work, thinking she was safe. But something twisted in my gut when I pulled into the driveway that evening. It wasn't nerves or paranoia, just an off feeling you only recognize in hindsight. And then the front door opened, and Grace stepped out. For a second, I didn't recognize her. Her hair, her long, perfectly styled hair, was gone. It wasn't trimmed or cut properly. It was short, uneven, and jagged. It looked like someone handed a raccoon a pair of gardening shears and let it go wild. Grace looked down as she walked toward me, her shoulders tight, her breathing shallow. I asked her what happened. She tried to smile, tried to be brave, but then she burst into tears. "They cut it," she whispered. My heart broke. "They cut it," I repeated, stunned. She nodded and said in a small voice, "Grandma and Auntie Sabrina." I wanted to scream, to storm into that house and confront them, but Grace was sobbing. So I knelt down, held her, and she buried her face in my neck and just cried. She asked if we could go home. I said we weren't going home yet, though my voice sounded calm, which scared me more than anything. We walked back to the house, my hand on her shoulder. Inside, Sabrina was clearing paper plates like nothing happened, and my mother was wiping counters, chatting about leftover cake. The air smelled like frosting and betrayal. I stood in the doorway and asked what happened to Grace's hair. Sabrina didn't flinch. She said they asked Grace to put it in a ponytail, and when she refused, they cut it. I blinked in disbelief. "You cut it," I said. My mother chimed in, saying Grace was being difficult and they gave her a choice. I was furious. "A choice?" I repeated. "You told an 11-year-old to do something she didn't want to do, and when she refused, you punished her by cutting her hair?" I remember that day like it was yesterday. We were at Bella's birthday party, my niece. Everything seemed normal, kids running around, laughter echoing through the backyard. But then, it happened. Sabrina, my sister, cut Bella's hair off, just like that. I was stunned, trying to process what just happened. Sabrina said it's just hair, but I knew it wasn't just that. It was more than that. Bella was crying, and seeing her like that, I felt something inside me just break. And then Sabrina, she started crying too when she saw what was left of Grace's hair. I couldn't believe it. This was about Grace, my daughter, who had done nothing but show up with a handmade gift for Bella. And there they were, my family, acting like Grace was some enemy at a high school prom, not a child with a kind heart. My hands went numb and my voice stayed calm, but inside I was anything but. I told them I was taking Grace home, and I didn't wait for anyone to say anything. Grace was outside, wiping her face, trying to hold back tears. We walked back to the car in silence, hand in hand. Halfway home, she asked me in a small voice if it could be fixed. My throat tightened, and I promised her we'd make it beautiful again. And the worst part? She believed me. She still thought the world could be put right, that things could be fixed. I didn't scream, didn't threaten, didn't even cry, not then. But soon enough, they'd be crying at the police station. People always talk about first signs, those red flags, gut instincts, the moments when the truth is revealed. I wish I could tell you there was one of those moments in my life, a line that was crossed, a slap, a scream, something dramatic. But it wasn't like that. My childhood was full of subtler things. It was a slow, constant drip of poison disguised as tradition. You don't grow up knowing you're the second choice daughter. It's more like a slow leak, and you don't even realize the ceiling is about to collapse on your head. Sabrina, my sister, is 2 years older than me. For the first 15 years of my life, I didn't question why she always got the nice things. The prettier dresses, the shiny shoes, the compliments. Let your sister wear it. She's older. You don't need mascara yet. You're still a little girl. That top is too mature for you. You don't want people looking at you that way. Never mind that Sabrina and I were practically the same height by the time I was 12, or that we went to the same school and were mistaken for twins all the time, or that I never asked for much, just not to be dressed like a camp counselor every time we went out in public. But it wasn't just the clothes. It was how my parents looked at her and how they looked through me. I didn't think I was pretty back then. I liked video games, books with dragons, and messy ponytails that fell apart the second I left the house. I wasn't trying to be anything, but apparently not trying was the problem. There's nothing more threatening to a girl raised to compete for attention than someone who gets it without asking. Sabrina never said it out loud, but I saw it in her face. Every time a boy looked at me instead of her, every time someone mistook me for the older sister, every time I made someone laugh without trying, and then she'd twist it around, make me feel like I'd done something wrong. I remember once, I was 14, she was 16. We were getting ready for a family friend's wedding, and she stormed into my room in full mascara meltdown mode. "Why are you wearing that dress?" she demanded. I blinked, confused. "It's the only one that fits me." "Did you do something to your hair?" she asked. "No, I washed it." She looked at me like I had just committed some terrible offense. I guess I've always known deep down that something was off between us. My sister and I, we were never really on the same wavelength. I remember that night so clearly. It was a typical family gathering, one of those occasions where everyone pretends to be closer than we really are. My sister Sabrina was there, full of her usual energy, and I was just trying to keep my head down, hoping not to draw any unwanted attention. That's what it was always like, just trying to get through without causing a scene. But that night, Brandon was going to be there. He was that boy Sabrina had been crushing on for years. I barely knew him, we just had one conversation about a book, but Sabrina's jealousy was enough to create a storm out of nothing. She accused me of flirting with him, which was ridiculous. I wasn't interested in him at all, but she wouldn't listen. She slammed her door, leaving me standing there, confused and frustrated. Later that night, my mom took me aside, telling me I should have worn something less flashy, because Sabrina was upset. I remember thinking how absurd it was. I was wearing a gray dress, nothing flashy about it, but that's how it always was. It didn't matter what I did, I was always the one at fault. Over time, the little things Sabrina did seemed to pile up. She'd hide my makeup or conveniently forget to tell me about changes to plans. Once she swapped my conditioner for shampoo and my hair was a frizzy mess for days. But what hurt more was how my parents always seemed to side with her. No matter how petty her actions were, they always saw me as the problem. I was too difficult, too sensitive, too much of everything they didn't want. Fast forward 10 years, and I thought I'd left all that behind. I thought success would change things. I worked hard, went through med school, endured long hours and sleepless nights, and eventually built a life I was proud of. I had my own house, a husband who respected me, and a daughter, Grace, who I wanted to give everything I never had. I thought maybe my family would finally see me differently, that they'd treat Grace better, but nothing really changed. During family visits, I'd see it happening all over again. Grace would show up in an outfit she chose, and my mom would make a comment about it being too much. Sabrina would make snide remarks about Grace's hair or makeup, even though there was nothing to criticize. It was the same old story. Don't stand out, don't shine too brightly. Bella, Sabrina's daughter, would watch and mimic her mother's behavior. I saw it happening, but I didn't want to believe it was as bad as it was. I caught Bella making snide comments to Grace after a family barbecue, but Grace didn't tell me much about it. She just seemed smaller somehow, diminished. I thought maybe it was just kids being kids. It wasn't until Grace's birthday that I realized how deep it ran. She came out of Sabrina's house with her hair cut short, and I knew. It was a punishment, a way to keep her from standing out. They saw in Grace the things they hated in me, and they went after her just like they did with me. I thought I had escaped it all, that I was protecting her from it, but I had walked her right into the same trap. I remember it so vividly, the moment when everything clicked. Grace was sitting at the kitchen table wearing a hoodie, and she said it so plainly. They held me down. She said it without tears, just flat and quiet, like she was talking about the weather. I stopped pouring tea, shocked and angry, but Grace just repeated it. Aunt Sabrina pushed her into the chair and Grandma told her to stop making a scene. Then they cut her hair. I was speechless, gripping the teapot, feeling a surge of anger and helplessness. They had laughed while doing it, and I realized how deeply ingrained this cycle of behavior was. I remember that day vividly, as if it happened just yesterday. It was supposed to be a simple family gathering, but it turned into something I never imagined. Grandpa had said I needed to be humbled, and somehow that translated into a spectacle. Bella and Connor decided to film the whole thing. Connor mentioned he was going to send it to some group chat, though I had no idea which one. I felt a rush of emotions when I realized what they were doing. I had to sit down because if I didn't, I knew I might do something I'd regret. They were filming it all, and Bella was giving directions like it was a movie set. Connor was holding up his tablet, recording everything with a smirk on his face, as if he found it amusing. And no one did anything to stop them. Grandpa was just eating cake as if nothing out of the ordinary was happening. Bella told them to make sure they got the front too. I remember staring at her, seeing her sitting there, looking smaller than ever. At that moment, something inside me shifted. I wasn't angry anymore. I was determined. I turned to Grace, who was sitting beside me, and I told her that what they did wasn't just wrong, it was illegal. She looked up at me, surprised. I explained that it was assault. They had touched her without permission, restrained her, cut her hair while she was crying. It wasn't just hair, it was a violation of her autonomy. She looked down, and I could see that she was processing it all. When I asked her if she wanted to report it, there was a pause. She picked at a loose thread on her sleeve, and then she said yes. "Let's do it," she agreed. I told her we'd need proof, and she reminded me that Connor filmed everything. I asked if she was sure, and she nodded. He was standing right in front of us the whole time, like it was some sort of YouTube vlog. I handed her my phone and suggested she ask him for the video. Without hesitation, she texted him, asking for the footage. Within 30 seconds, he responded with a simple, "Okay," a laughing emoji, and the video file. No shame, no suspicion. We watched the video together. It was short, maybe 12 seconds, but it captured everything. Grace was crying, pleading for them to stop. Sabrina was grabbing her hair while my mother stood behind them, arms crossed, as if she were watching something mundane. My father sat on the couch holding a plastic fork and said she'd thank them later. Connor was laughing and Bella was shouting to cut the front next. Grace watched the video in silence, her face blank. When it ended, she looked at me and simply asked if we could go now. We didn't waste any time. We went straight to the police station. No dramatic lead-up, no change of clothes. Grace was still in her hoodie and I was wearing yesterday's makeup. None of that mattered. At the station, they assigned us to a detective named Alvarez. She seemed kind, with practical eyes that didn't blink as we recounted what happened. Grace handed over the video with a sense of purpose. Alvarez watched it twice, her expression shifting from tightness to sharpness, then flattening into quiet disgust. She told us they were opening a formal case. Grace remained composed, answering questions and even asking a few of her own. When Alvarez mentioned that a child advocate would be present for a follow-up interview, Grace nodded, taking it all in. I could sense her anger, but it was a controlled kind of anger, not the trembling fear from before. By the time we returned to the car, Grace was buzzing with a new energy. Not joy, but something sharper, like the silence that had weighed her down was finally gone. She asked what would happen next. I told her honestly there'd be paperwork, a follow-up, possibly a court case, maybe protective orders. It wouldn't be easy. She nodded and simply said, "Good." That single word sent chills through me. Later that night, the phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. I remember the moment all too vividly. The phone rang, and I didn't recognize the number at first, but the voice was unmistakable. It was my mother, and she didn't waste any time with pleasantries. Her words hit me like a brick. "Are you insane?" She didn't even bother with a hello. The accusation came swift and sharp. I'd gone to the police, over hair. She was furious, and to her, it felt like I was about to shatter the very foundation of our family. She didn't pause for a response. She just kept going, as if her words alone could undo what I'd done. She accused me of ruining everything, of destroying the family. I let her words wash over me, her fear and anger evident in every syllable. When she finally paused, perhaps to catch her breath, I simply responded, "You should have thought of that before you assaulted my child." The silence on the other end was deafening. She protested, insisting that what happened wasn't an assault, just a haircut. But to me, it was more than that. It was a violation, an act of humiliation, and now it was something else. Evidence. Another moment of silence followed, a beat of disbelief, perhaps. She tried to reason with me, telling me I wasn't thinking clearly and needed to calm down. I suggested she take it up with the detective and ended the call. I didn't feel guilty, not one bit. This wasn't over. It was just the beginning. The next morning, my phone rang again. This time, I was prepared. I was sipping coffee, holding onto my frustration like a lifeline. It was Sabrina on the line, and I could hear the tension in her voice. She told me that Child Protective Services had shown up at her house unannounced. They wanted to see Bella's room, asked if there were scissors around. I listened quietly, stirring my coffee, letting the silence fill the space between us. Then, in a whisper, she accused me of following through with pressing charges. I corrected her. I hadn't pressed charges. I'd simply reported what happened. The consequences were out of my hands now. The same old refrain came up again. It was just hair, just fun, just sisters being sisters. I countered that holding down a crying child, cutting her hair without her consent, filming it and mocking her wasn't something to trivialize. If she considered that parenting, then she had bigger problems than I could help with. Sabrina tried to appeal to me, to retract the report, claiming I was tearing the family apart. She feared she could lose her kids. I reminded her that she should have thought about that before laying a hand on mine. I hung up, no goodbye, no further justification, just the decisive end of a conversation I wasn't willing to revisit. That afternoon, I received screenshots. My parents and Sabrina had taken to Facebook, weaving their version of events like it was some sort of narrative competition. They claimed it was a game, that Grace had wanted a makeover, that I was overreacting, as always. They assured everyone that they loved Grace and were simply bonding. Bonding? That wasn't bonding. It was coercion. One comment in particular stood out, from Brenda from church, who suggested that I was using my daughter in some twisted obsession with appearances. Really, Brenda, that's your takeaway? I showed the post to Grace. She read through the comments, her mouth tightening with each lie. "They're lying," she said softly, and I nodded in agreement. They were getting away with it, but they wouldn't if we shared the truth. I looked at her, contemplating whether to post the video. Her expression changed, no longer that of a scared child, but of someone who was ready to stand up. She urged me to post it. So I did, No lengthy caption, no fiery rant, just the raw truth. This was what they called a game. My 11-year-old daughter crying as they held her down and cut her hair against her will. She said no, and they laughed. I attached the video. The reaction was immediate. By the evening, the same people who called me dramatic in the morning were apologizing. The clarity that comes with undeniable evidence was remarkable. People were horrified. Even those who initially doubted me began erasing their previous comments. It's strange how quickly perspectives shift when faced with the truth. Grace sat beside me as we watched the view count climb. It was something to witness, validation, not in words, but in numbers, in the changing tide of public opinion. I remember that moment vividly. She was smiling, not a broad smile, but one that said, "They see me now. I'm not invisible anymore." It was a simple moment, yet it meant everything. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with a message from my dad. He said, "Hey, your rent transfer didn't come through this month. Was there an issue?" I stared at the screen for a moment, my mind racing. I typed back, "No issue. I'm just not paying for people who laughed while my daughter begged them to stop." It was easy for them to deflect, to deny what really happened. He responded with, "Come on, Ruby, you're really cutting us off over a haircut." There it was, the refusal to call it what it was. I replied, "Because it wasn't a haircut, it was an assault. And when you had the chance to say it was wrong, you chose to lie about it on Facebook. Also, if you ever try to contact Grace again, I will report it." There was a pause before he sent back, "Well, I guess money means more to you than family." I didn't reply, not because I didn't have a dozen things I wanted to say, but because I don't argue with people who confuse consequences with betrayal. Later that week, Grace and I returned to the salon. The stylist I booked was warm and gentle. She knew exactly how to handle hair that had been butchered by family drama and kitchen scissors. She didn't try to make it long again, or use words like fix. Instead, she leaned down to Grace and said, "Let's make this yours." An hour later, Grace was looking at herself in the mirror, touching the new shape of her hair. She tilted her head and smiled. "I look awesome." And you know what? She did. The following week, Grace gave her full statement at the station. She walked in like she owned the building. No tears, no hesitation. She answered every question clearly. When they asked how it made her feel, she said, "Like they thought I didn't matter." When they asked why she was reporting it, she said, "Because I do." I sat there with my hands clasped in my lap, listening to my daughter reclaim every inch of her voice. When we got to the car, I asked, "Do you ever want to see them again?" She didn't even look at me. "No, never." I nodded. "Then you won't. You get to choose who's in your life now and who's not." A month passed. The case went through. None of them went to jail. I didn't expect they would, but it stuck. It mattered. My mother, my father, and Sabrina were all convicted of misdemeanor assault. They each got a criminal record. They each had to pay a fine. But Sabrina got the worst of it, as she should have. She was ordered to complete a full parenting course. CPS would be monitoring their household for the next year. I heard from someone that Tyler threatened to leave her. Their vacation got canceled. The stress was eating them alive. And I didn't feel bad, not even a little. Grace still doesn't want to see them. She doesn't want any of them near her. Not at school events, not at birthdays, not at all. And I listen to that every time because I know now respecting her choices isn't just healing, it's power. And they took enough of hers already. Not anymore. So did I go too far or not nearly far enough? Some people said I overreacted, that I should have kept it in the family, that it was just hair. And maybe they'd be right if they weren't talking about my 11-year-old being held down, humiliated, and violated by the people who were supposed to protect her. Maybe justice looked quieter to them. But to me, justice looked like my daughter walking into a salon with her head held high. Justice looked like her knowing that someone finally would fight for her. So I wonder, should I have gone further? Cut them out sooner, dragged them to court until the ink dried on their guilt? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, raw and just a little bit satisfying, hit subscribe.